Fitterist Show with your host, Christopher Allen, where we explore the art of mind and body conditioning. This week, we take a look at a couple of news stories in the headlines from this past holiday Christmas week. Up first is a study involving food labeling and whether there are more effective approaches to food labels that might help consumers make better and more consistent food choices. And we also examine a recent study published in the Journal of Functional Foods that looks at the effects of caffeine on a holiday-infused diet that is higher in fats and sugars. So let's dive in. Our first news story is about a recent study published in the Journal of Epidemiology and Community Health that contends that the evolution of the labeling of food and food products can actually help to combat obesity and help consumers make better food choices. So a little bit of history here. Food labeling in the U.S. has been around since the 1970s, but only in 1994 did the FDA and USDA make labels on food products actually mandatory. So it's a fairly recent development. Most U.S. food labels are not very user-friendly. They can be complex, difficult to read. You have to calculate a little bit to understand the fat content. And as such, people may not be making fully informed decisions when purchasing food in the grocery store. So this study, their proposed solution? Well, these researchers propose putting additional information on food labels that would identify the exercise expenditure to burn off the caloric equivalent of the food that's packaged. Specifically, they would add what's called a physical activity caloric equivalent. The acronym is PACE, so they call them PACE labels, in addition to current food labels. So you wouldn't lose any of the existing information that's on food labels. This would just be an addition for more information. And to give you a little context, I will actually include an example of a mocked-up PACE label in the show notes at www.fitterist.com/040 for episode 40, so you can get an idea of what these food labels might actually look like and what information they would add to the existing label information. So as an example, a bag of chips would include, in addition to the stated 170 calories in the chips, a small graphic to show that it would take about 31 minutes of brisk walking or 16 minutes of running to burn off the equivalent of the 170 calories contained in the bag of chips. So again, the theory behind the research is that these PACE labels would present the information in a more accessible way to consumers than the existing calorie and nutrient content labels. This would also give consumers more information than what they're getting today. However, the researchers also kind of admitted that they did some small studies, mostly in controlled environments, which are, problematic sometimes. But the PACE labels were more effective than no labeling, but were not necessarily more effective than the calorie-only / existing labeling. Even so, researchers still contend that obesity is such a huge problem globally that PACE labels are still worth trying on a broad basis, including food and drink packaging, supermarket labels, and even restaurant menus. They want to get this thing everywhere. And researchers, they estimate that the large-scale application of PACE labels could, on average, cut caloric consumption by up to 200 calories per person per day. Combined with an increase in physical activity, this could lead to a decrease in obesity rates. So that's kind of the theory of the study and some of the early findings. Now, what are some of the concerns? The first concern raised was that PACE labels promote a bit of an earn and burn mentality, particularly in those people with eating disorders. That is, the I just ran 30 minutes so I can eat 2 candy bars mentality, which is not really true because remember, not all calories are created equal. Another concern is that PACE labels promote that calories are the main consideration rather than true nutrients of what's in the food when one is on a diet when it comes to food. Obviously, one should know that you shouldn't have a diet based on candy bars and potato chips. But if you take it to the extreme and just look at caloric intake, calories in, calories out, without looking at any nutrient values, you could have some errant behavior. Now, people generally eat so poorly that even a reduction in the sheer calories consumed is probably a net positive overall. The researchers also cited a study from July of 2019 that found that cutting just 300 calories from a daily diet led to lower blood pressure, lower levels of bad LDL cholesterol, as well as a 24% drop in concentrations of triglycerides, which is a type of fat in the blood. So my take? Well, first a couple of data points. Obesity in adults is around 40%. 40%. That's 40%. As in just under half the population. This number is flat out of control. Obesity is a key contributor to many nutrition-related chronic diseases, including diabetes, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, and even cancer, links to cancer. There's been no long-term success in reducing obesity rates and changing behavior to halt and reverse that trend to prevent this growth in obesity and subsequent diseases. There's growing recognition that this is in part due to the physical environments that surround the public, which can exert considerable influences on health behaviors. And many people don't understand the meaning of calories or grams of fat in terms of energy and caloric balance. A key challenge to limiting energy consumption is the significant underestimation by the public in general of the amount of calories and fat that are in food and drinks. So, we have a group of researchers that is basically saying, let's try this PACE food labeling system to help combat obesity. It's more informative. Food labels are not something Big Food is going to initiate. They're not necessarily going to support it. Remember, their goal is to get you to buy larger quantities more frequently, more often, basically forever. Yes, there's definitely added cost to food manufacturers that will inevitably trickle down and be passed along to the consumer. But the key takeaway is that 1. PACE labels and food labeling may reduce the number of calories selected from menus and decrease the number of calories of food consumed by people, compared with other types of food labeling or no labeling at mealtimes. The findings also highlight the importance of easily understood food labels to reduce the calorie intake by the population in general. We're not talking about nutritionists, we're talking about population in general. And this needs to decrease the selection of higher calorie foods and drinks on a regular basis. And public health agencies may want to consider the possibility of including policies to promote things like PACE food labeling as a strategy that contributes to the prevention and treatment of obesity and related diseases. But in my opinion, look, we have to start to try something. Why not try PACE labels? That, of course, needs to be in addition to many other initiatives, but we need to start to take action to combat this epidemic of obesity. Even if the actual catalyst to change is some evolution of the PACE label or some variant or some other label, it seems like taking the first step here is something that's highly warranted. My take. And now, on to news article number 2. This second study tries to answer the question, can caffeine prevent holiday weight gain? This is a recently published study out of the University of Illinois that claims that consuming caffeine can limit weight gain and cholesterol production even while eating a diet that's high in fat and sugar. The researchers fed a group of rats a diet that consisted of about 40 to 45% carbohydrates, about 15% protein for 4 weeks. The rats were fed a high-fat, high-sucrose diet, and for some added synthetic caffeine from coffee, from mate tea, or decaffeinated mate tea extracts. The amount of caffeine per serving ranged from 65 to 130 milligrams. Now, what were the results? Well, those rats who got fed the caffeine from mate had, on average, 16% less weight gain and 22% less body fat accumulation than those that had the decaffeinated extracts. Now, given these findings, the researchers concluded that caffeine can be considered a bit of an anti-obesity agent. The results of this research could be scaled to humans to understand the roles of caffeine as potential strategies to prevent overweight and obesity, as well as subsequent metabolic disorders associated with these conditions. And they also concluded that the consumption of caffeine from tea or other sources alleviated the negative impact of a high-fat, high-sucrose diet on body composition due to the modulation of certain lipogenic enzymes in both adipose tissue and in the liver. If these results were then scaled to humans, remember the research was done on mice and rats only, the extrapolation would mean that drinking about 4 cups of coffee daily could help reduce weight gain from a diet that's high in fat and sugar. So what's my take? Overall, I think there are a number of potential red flags when perusing the research in a little more detail. First, caffeine is a well-documented stimulant, and as such, it can definitely speed up metabolism and various internal processes over a short period of time. Second, the extrapolation from mice and rats to humans, while great for headlines, is a bit of a stretch. To be fair, the researcher did indicate that this research could be scaled to humans to better understand the role of caffeine on weight gain and obesity. And in my opinion, this would be a logical next step. But it might be a bit premature to make the leap to drinking 4 cups of coffee, which is about 800 milligrams of caffeine, daily, and feel that that will allow you to eat a high-fat and high-sugar diet. And finally, there's a big difference between losing some weight in a very short period of time. There's lots of ways to do that, all of which are pretty much not sustainable, and making dietary and lifestyle changes for lasting and long-term changes. Obviously, the latter is the correct approach. Eating healthy, well-balanced diet will serve you much better over the long run, even if you splurge a bit around the holidays and enjoy those holiday cookies and desserts. Knowing you have the discipline to get right back on your eating plan should give you the confidence to do some guilt-free indulging during the holidays. But don't think that caffeine is the cure-all and that that's an excuse to overindulge and continue to say, well, I'll just crank up the caffeine and I'll continue to eat a high-fat and high-sugar diet. Not the way it works. Happy holidays.
Ho, 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 ho. Merry Christmas.
With that, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen to The Fitterist Show. You can follow us on Instagram at FitteristMindBody and on Twitter at FitteristMind. If you enjoyed this episode, please send it to a friend or subscribe to make sure you don't miss any future episodes of The Fitterist Show. My name is Christopher Allen, and make it a magical day.